Widely acclaimed First Nations dance theatre company Bangarra is set to hit the stage in Aotearoa this week with its latest show called Song. The Bangarra Dance Theatre Company draws on the extreme hardships faced by the Aboriginal people over many years and channels it into art and theatre. Stephen Page has been the artistic director for the Bangarra Dance Theatre for more than 30 years and is a descendant of the Nanuku people and the Mananjali clan of the Yungabe Nation, southeast Queensland. We spoke to him about his new production.
Look, Song was conceived pretty much at late 2019, and then the work was inspired by one of our Bangarra's. Well, look, it's a personal story, Neil, to myself and Frances Rings, who's now the present artistic director of Bangarra. Her and I wanted to celebrate the legacy of Ningali Lawford Wolf, who was a dear friend who passed away in 2019. Now, Ningali is from the Kimberleys in Western Australia, on the top of Western Australia, and she always she contributed to Bangarra in her stories. She's an actress. You might remember Ningali from Rabbit Proof Fence. Well, she passed away, and she always wanted to do a work with Bangarra. Anyway, Song is about the Kimberley, the Great Sandy Desert. It deals with subjects, black social issues, about mob, her mob and her people being displaced from their lands, the significance of cultural significance of landmarks, and it celebrates a variation of stories through her connection to country in the Kimberleys. And it was a gift that she wanted to do a work with Bangarra just before she passed. She was very interested in contributing her story.
But Māori iwi tribes are often surrounded by water, and the idea is that water is a life-giving force and healer. What similarities do you see between this and First Nations people connection to the desert?
Yeah, look, as you know, the landmarks, Australia is very vast. First Nations people landscape, north, south, east and west, is that the characters are very different, from the tropics in the north to the Pinda dirt, the red dirt of the central desert, especially with all the Pitjantjatjara mob in the central desert, who have been really instrumental with stories with us, and who actually helped work on the Sydney Olympics, to the Great Sandy Desert, which is a different red dirt altogether. So you've got to imagine there's over 500 or more different dialects of First Nations people language. So therefore, the country and its character and its different significance. You talked about water, sacred water holes, you know, and this story is a key point in Song. And the top of WA in Northern Territory, up near Halls Creek, during the early 1900s, there was a guy called Alfred Canning who started what do you call it, a stock route, Canning stock route, which was meant for cattle state, one of the biggest in the world, and it cut through and it displaced a lot of mob on country. There were a lot of sacred water holes, which they called jillas, and yeah, he was a bit ruthless, actually. He used a lot of the mob and the men in particular as slaves. Anyway, we know displacement. We know mob trying to spend generations after reconnecting back, making sure all those cultural practices are kept in their knowledge. But this is a common thing. You know about the southern part of Australia, the many massacres and onslaughts, and we carry generationally through our mother and father's sides of culture to rekindle these cultural practices.
Stephen, what connection then do you see between First Nations people of Australia and Māori of Aotearoa?
Well, obviously there's similarities between First Nations people globally, and look, I think it's just when First Peoples have that beautiful connection of really understanding the truth of land and its significance and the relationship with land and people and water and sky, creation stories, mythology, First Nations people's land management, how they preserve before pre-contact. There are all this knowledge that we are just now passing down generationally and hanging on through that sense of information that comes through.
Do you have any plans to collaborate with Māori theatre or kapahaka to create a piece of art connecting both countries and cultures?
Yeah, look, the kapahaka, Frances Rings actually did some masterclasses years ago at the New Zealand Dance Company, and she had great connection with a lot of Maori people there and sharing those similarities. I think Fran might have something creatively going on in her little sacred cave about a collaboration down the line.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Look, Stephen Page, Artistic Director for the Bangarra Dance Company's new show, Sandsong, playing at the ASB Waterfront Arena from 15th to the 18th of March. Thank you so much for joining us today, and all the best for Sandsong season.
Thanks for having me.
Ngā mihi.
Thanks for having me, Neil.